Hello and welcome to episode 217 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is November 13th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone. So over 2 years ago, we already had talked about the SAP Landing Zone Accelerator. The idea is to help customers to get started with their SAP systems on Azure. In the meantime, a lot of things have happened. The documentation is constantly evolving, and a lot of new things have been added. We not only cover pure infrastructure topics anymore, but we also talk about SAP and Data or SAP and Power Platform. In order to give us an update on what's new, I'm really happy to have Pankaj again with us to talk a little about the SAP on Azure Landing Zone Accelerator. Welcome, Pankaj. Thanks for joining us today. Before we go into the topic, can you quickly introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Holger. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here on your podcast once again. This is one of the very heavily followed podcasts all over the world, as you can see from the number of views you get on each of your recordings, right? So Pankaj Meshram, I'm part of the Global Customer Success Unit, where I'm responsible for technical strategy of SAP on Azure workloads from CSU, Customer Success Unit side.
Cool. And I think what I really liked when I look back, I mean, you have been concentrating on the landing zone for quite some time. And I really love how you stick to this, how you constantly evolve. And I actually watched as a preparation for our show today, I watched the session that we recorded over 2 years ago. And it's really amazing to see how much has changed in the meantime, how much more content there is in the Landing Zone Accelerator. So thank you so much for driving this. Thank you so much for really sticking to this and adding new content there.
Absolutely, Holger, and I think all of us can relate to the changing market conditions with respect to how we evolve our documentation and contents and IP and packages, right? And I'm actually thankful to all the people in Microsoft who have something to do with SAP, because there is a contribution coming in from all different parts of Microsoft, right? So this is a one Microsoft approach that we follow quite often in all of our work. So I'm glad to see this is coming out and being used by the customers.
Yeah, we have a great SAP community within Microsoft, so that's definitely really cool. So maybe to get started, and maybe for those of our viewers or listeners who have not seen the episode 2 years ago, could you maybe quickly talk a little about the SAP on Azure Landing Zone Accelerator and maybe show us what it is and why would I as a customer use it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen and explain about it. Yeah.
That would be great. Perfect. Yeah, your screen is coming up. There it is.
Okay. It's effectively SAP Landing Zone Accelerator is a collection of all the best practices that any customer should leverage when they are architecting the SAP solutions on Azure, right? And this is where we go deeper into all of the design areas, whether it's networking, whether it's identity, whether it's security, governance. And that's why we have the detailed design guidelines on all of these different areas. So whether you think about, resource organization, governance disciplines, operations baseline. So effectively, you're safeguarding the migration journey when you're migrating from on-prem to Azure, in a sense that you're already leveraging all the best practices when it comes to deployment from architectural perspective. And not just that, this is something which was started a couple of years ago based on all the learnings that we had from our existing deployments, a number of customer deployments that we had. And then this has evolved over the years as well, right? Because this is not a static document. There are products and services which gets retired. There are products which are renamed. There are new capabilities, new offerings coming from products. So there's a constant work going behind the scenes where the community is doing continuous updates and learnings, because sometimes some new product comes into picture, which works very well with the customers. And based on that, we keep on updating this document, adding new capabilities. And that's where we have also started to think about how do we innovate with SAP on Azure, considering the landing zone perspective, right? when a customer has used all the best practices, when a customer has deployed their SAP systems, what else they can do with their SAP landscapes. And um, a lot of time when we talk about that, as you may have seen and you have done it so often, we talk about SAP with data, we talk about SAP with Power Platform. Now, this year, a lot of feedback has been on innovation of SAP with AI, Copilot, and that's the sort of stream that we are following. So when we go and talk to customers in all different events which are happening around the world, or when we get feedback from our engineering product groups, that all of those feedbacks helps us to decide the direction of the articles, right? What is it that the customer basically needs? And this is where we worked on SAP and data some time ago. So you have a number of articles and how can you identify different SAP data sources, choose the best SAP connectors, performance troubleshooting, think about security, and how does an example architecture looks like. So not only we have architectures, which is referring to the core landing zone piece here, where you will see, how does a landing zone looks like and how does SAP landing zone fits into the picture. But how, when you are extending this landing zone, when you have done with all the basic infra migration pieces, how do we innovate with this, right? So how does an architecture from data integration perspective looks like? So there are some good examples that are available in that. And continuing on the same theme, we have the latest release has been SAP and the Microsoft Power Platform articles, so a bunch of 3 articles, which we'll go in details.
No, and before we go there, I quickly also want to highlight one thing that I really love about all of this documentation, because obviously we have a lot of this documentation on Azure that is very Azure generic, what you can do there. And similarly on the SAP side, there are some cool articles that talk about SAP. But if I'm now a customer who wants to approach SAP and Microsoft, then I think in the past, I had to pick up some information there from the Microsoft pieces. I had to pick up the relevant information on the SAP side. Then I had to put it together. And you started the work by just looking at the infrastructure at first to really give customers one single place to go where they saw, look, these are all the virtual machines, but actually keep in mind for SAP, you need certified virtual machines. So make sure that you only take those. And then from a networking perspective, from a storage perspective, that you really consolidated the information for an SAP and Microsoft specific thing. And now, as you said here, with the innovate with SAP on and Microsoft or Azure, you're doing the same thing again. There are some cool documentations on Fabric, on the data story, but it's not necessarily SAP specific. Same thing with the Power Platform. There are some really great documentations on the Power Platform, but it's not really SAP specific. And now you're bringing all of these things together. So again, that I, as a customer who wants to do something in this area, I just can go there, and here I have everything in one single place, basically, to get me started. I think you also have a lot of links that reference to the Power Platform documentation or to the Fabric documentation. But I have here the best starting point to really, out of these thousands of links that are out there, millions of links, you provide me with the ones that really are relevant for my SAP and whatever integration. And that's what I really like. This is a perfect place to get started, basically.
Indeed, Holger, that's the basic idea behind the scenes, right? How does the customer starts their journey with SAP on Azure, and how do they innovate? So when it comes from customer's point of view, how can I get the practices, the design considerations, the recommendations which are specific to my landscape, which are specific to SAP workload, right? And that's the key bit that we are offering, always looking to figure out when we are developing these articles.
Cool. Perfect. So, and you were already saying, so we have quite a few new documents in here. So can you show us a little more?
Yes. So we have released just recently. We have released 3 important articles. So if customers or partners, if they're going onto this page, they will see this section, Innovate with SAP and Azure. We had SAP and Data before, and now we have come up with SAP and Power Platform section as well. And again, this is coming from from the same point of view, think of it a customer who may have some business requirements when it comes to low code and no code app development, a customer who doesn't want to do heavy customization on the existing systems, a customer who wants to avoid, extensive skill sets when it comes to customization or longer timeframes for the project itself, right? That's where something like Power Platform and the whole suite of apps within Power Platform that comes into picture for those kind of customers. And uh, thinking thinking from a customer angle, so the first article is basically giving some information, some fundamental information about how can you extend your SAP by using Power Platform. And if you look at this article, the way we have started is it talks about the cloud platform components, the Power Apps, Automate, Copilot Studio, Power Pages, PI. So just giving information to customer on what actually are these components, right? So what is meant by all these components? When we talk about Power Platform, what are these components? What are they used for, right? Um, and as we go a little bit into the article, we start to go and talk about the different capabilities of the suites. For example, you have out of the box SAP connectors, which connects to SAP systems. You have AI builders, for image, text, predictive analysis of your SAP workflows, and then you have managed environments for governance, compliance, and scalability. Um, in in the same sense, if you're looking to extend your SAP application with Power Apps and Power Pages, then what kind of apps you can build? You have Canvas, you have model-driven apps, depending on the complexity of the business logic. You have Power Pages to create professional and internal external websites. So there's quite a bit of information coming in, and it kind of covers each component of the Power Platform suite in relation to SAPs. For example, if you look at automate SAP workflows, it talks about different workflows and different business processes, use cases, for example, streamlining your routine tasks, automating processes, improving collaboration. So it's a very well thought article from a baseline perspective, right? Again, there's mention of Copilot Studio, so self-service capabilities that are quite heavily used nowadays. So users can interact with Copilots and get some regular information that they always need when they are having interaction with SAP systems, status updates, transaction initiations, all that kind of regular tasks, and kind of ends it up with not just touching the core ERP business system, but in fact the business intelligence and the Power BI suite side of it, because Power BI is the component on the Power Platform side, right? So it talks about certain connectors that could be used to connect not just to Business Warehouse, but SAP HANA as well. I do want to give a huge credit to the V team. I'm going to say their name, Michael Mergel and Shekhar Gupta, who have been working behind the scenes on developing all those three articles. So again, they have learned from their customer engagements, and a lot of feedback has come in. Credit to you, Holger and Martin as well. You have helped us to review these documents and provided a lot of feedback from product perspective. As I said, this is a one Microsoft approach, right? It's a circle for us where we learn from each other and develop something which we think is going to be extremely useful for our customers.
No, and I really think this is very useful. For example, I mean, you have now here the Power BI screen open. If I would go to the Power BI pages, basically, then I would see this huge list of connectors, and then I could drill down, and I would probably get lost if I would look for SAP specific content. They have some fantastic content. Don't get me wrong, but it is just one piece of a much broader documentation. And here I see Power BI and SAP and have all the relevant links to get started. And I think that's where the real value is. This is a condensed view of things that I, as a customer who wants to do SAP and Power BI, can find relevant information. So I think this is really fantastic.
Thank you. And then on the second article, as I talked about the fundamentals, the view from the team was, let's take it a level higher, right? So if we talked about level 100 when it comes to SAP and Power Platform components, how do we go and take it to the next level, which would be more useful for our customers? So that's where you start to see some architecture details, and this is a very well thought design. showcasing all the different connectors that we have on the Power Platform side. And when these connectors are connecting, whether they are using RFC protocol, whether they are using OData, depending on what kind of connection mechanism is, what kind of security mechanisms they are going through. So if you look at, ERP connector, that's firewall, you have OData going through API gateways. And then on the right-hand side, it doesn't matter where your SAP system is sitting. It could be running on Rise, it could be running on Azure, it could be on another cloud provider. But as long as you have this connection set up, you can still do the same sort of low-code and no-code app development or analytics, or build your Copilot studios.
Yeah. And providing, showing here the different options, how I can connect to this, so that I can again pick the scenario that is relevant for my current integration, and then I see all the flow end to end, how the architecture would look like for such a scenario.
Exactly. And not just that, what we have done is, so to make it very useful for our customers, almost like a table chart here, which talks about what are the connectivity options, what are the different scenarios when you would use the connectivity options, where would you put your on-premise data gateway, whether you would use API management for SSO, whether you would use on-premise data gateway, that kind of information, and what protocols it's using. So it's quite clear when we are having conversations with these teams in any customer, SAP customer, and they have much more clarity when we are looking at this particular all those different options. So they're not confused when we talk about, oh, what's OData connector and what's an ERP connector. Okay, we can clearly see the difference in here, right? And that was the aim, that we provide as much clarity to a customer from the beginning, where they have the foundation available for their conversations, for building their business cases. And then we followed up in terms of some of the learnings that the V team and product groups have had in terms of what are the different design considerations, which is effectively what you should consider when you're designing your architecture, in the sense whether it's custom connectors, whether it's Power Automate, whether it's middleware requirement, for example, placement of on-premise data gateway, which has been a good topic around some few good years. High availability and load balancing on that side. So if your data gateway, one of the VM goes down, effectively it's a Windows client, as you know. If one of them goes down, to make sure you have the other one redundancy available. And what if a customer is a fully SAP-centric approach? Then think about API management and cloud connectors, and versus Azure API, because we have a similar resources on Power on Azure as well. And not just that.
So can I just, because I think this is super helpful. You have no idea how many discussions I was in with a customer, where especially when it comes to Power Platform and SAP, where we maybe even had a very established Power Platform practice at the customer, and then there was an ask from the customer to also connect to an SAP system. But in some cases, the SAP team at the customer said, no, look, we will not allow you to connect to our SAP system. And then we started the discussion, and sometimes we started with this SAP ERP connector. And the SAP team said, no, we don't allow BAPIs anymore. And with this table, with this overview, we can say, okay, sure, no problem. SAP ERP connector, let's not use it. But look, there's another design consideration. And we can also use, you are an SAP-centric customer. So then let's go with SAP BTP, the SAP Cloud Connector, SAP API Management, and let's use the SAP OData Connector. And I think that's the beauty of this table, and also the consideration that you have below, that there's one single view where we can go in the discussion with the customer and say, look, it's not that one is better than the others. There are different options, there are recommendations, there are best practices for each and every of these connectors. And this is all now here in this one single place. So again, for me as a customer that wants to get an overview of what's possible, this is exactly the place where I can find these recommendations.
Exactly, and that was, I think, one of your feedback based on number of conversations that you had with all different customers, that you have to find information in different places, and that was the scene behind the scene, in the sense that we wanted to bring all this information together at a single place. And then it goes, again, it follows the same sort of lifestyle here, in the sense the workflow here, where it talks about what are the different considerations you should do when it comes to integrating SAP with Power Platform. So, identify your business challenges, set your goals, think about the licensing requirements, think about network connectivity, how we're going to make sure that security and compliance is in place, like authentication mechanisms with the SSO via Microsoft Entra ID. So that's one with OData connector that is in preview, right? So we've tried to capture all those important little details which make significant difference when it comes to configuration, right? And that's the scene behind all of these, whether it's talking about technical readiness, governance, skill sets, testing strategy, cost considerations. All of these considerations have been thought very carefully and put it into this article. So when I, as a customer, when I look at it, not only I get the options of all the different connection mechanisms, but as a project, when I'm thinking about running this particular project, I get an idea of all those things that I need to think about and take an action on all of those topics to make sure that I'm covering end to end when it comes to this kind of projects, right? Innovation projects. And that was the idea behind the scenes on this one.
Cool. Yeah. Nice.
Thank you. And on the last article is again on the architecture, but it's now is more focused in the sense of okay, so you have done your SAP Landing Zone, so you have used SAP Landing Zone Accelerator, you have deployed your SAP systems on Azure. But what about the fact on when you are extending that, how do you do it, right? What are the prerequisites needed to do that, right? For example, you might need administrative access, you might need necessary license, better understanding of network, firewalls, an existing, then you may have an existing landing zone, which is already having, network subscription, connectivity subscription, management subscription, and where all these components from Power Platform perspective, where do they fit into this picture? That was the idea. Let's say custom applications and co-pilots, they use connectors. So where do these connectors will sit in the landscape? And if it's a RISE system, then where does your on-prem data gateway sits? Because that's within the Azure subscription of the customer, right? Those minute differences have been highlighted in this case. Even with ERP connector, where should it be installed? If it's an on-prem system, it's near on-prem. If it's on RISE, it's an Azure subscription of the customer. If it's an SAP landing zone, then it's within the landing zone itself. So you have the close proximity and we don't have any performance challenges with that. So it's quite a bit of information from that perspective on all the different connectors. And not just that, there's in addition to basic anonymous API authentication, as you know very well, Holger, the OData connector supports SSO through Azure API management. So you have features like SAP principal propagation with SAP services like S/4HANA and Cloud and RISE. And all of this is happening through Microsoft Entra ID. So how does that look like is something which, again, we have picked it from one of the articles here. So we have done that same picture here to showcase how does it look like and why this is important, because security, as you know, is one of the core priorities across all Microsoft. So in all the articles, you will find security is as one of the component to make sure that we're always thinking of security when it all different connections when we're from left to right, whenever we are going from Power Platform to the other side or the other way around as well.
No, absolutely. And I still remember when we released the SAP Data Connector in private preview, and we only had support for basic authentication. We got a lot of great feedback from the customers, but basically all customers said, look, that's nice, but we will never go productive with this solution. We need to have single sign-on. And that's your setup SSO. That's exactly what you describe here. How can customers use this now to really have a principal propagation flow from your Power Platform to your SAP system? And obviously that helps a lot with the security, because you don't have users writing down their username and password and stuff like that, but this is really a single sign-on flow. Cool.
Yeah, and we have in all the articles we have also connected with how can you do it. So all the product articles that we have on Microsoft Learn pages. So whether if you want to configure the SSO, then what are the pages that need to go and look after, and what are the steps that you need to do. The the how part of this particular page or any of the products that you mentioned here, any of the configurations. So we have tried to link all of those important articles from product group as a to learn more to configurations and other parts of the page as well. So customer learns what to do, and then they can go on to different pages in terms of how to do that.
And it is basically still a living document, right? I mean, as you said, this is very much customer driven. So if our colleagues like Michael, if they get feedback from their customer projects, for example, they let you know, and then you work with them to update the documentation, to add new functionalities. And sometimes it's bigger updates, like now this new section of SAP and Microsoft Power Platform. Sometimes it's smaller enhancements and as you said in the beginning, if a new virtual machine comes in or something like that, then obviously the document needs to be updated. But this is basically a living document with feedback from the community, from customers, from product management, and so on.
Indeed, Holger. So even when I talked about the design areas from infrastructure perspective, a lot of things keep on changing, right? Think about Azure Active Directory, which has been renamed as Microsoft Entra ID, which means we have to do updates on all the documentation.
Yes.
Any sort of new learnings which we may have. Think about PPGs. We used to talk about PPGs before, right? So we have kind of moved away from those recommendations now to avoid constraints on the M-series upgrade, right?
Yeah.
And there are many examples like that. There are just two examples that I came to the top of my head, but there are so many examples. And sometimes we have updates on scripts as well. For example, let's say, how to check the distance between two zones. In the sense, we have publicly available scripts to make sure that customers are deploying active model for SAP systems. So we keep on updating whatever is getting updated from our product group and make sure everything is available in this forum.
Cool. No, this is really fantastic, and it's great to see how this is evolving. How really so many new things are constantly being added to the landing zone here. This is really cool.
Yeah, once again, a shout out to my colleagues, Michael and Shaker. I'm sure they will listen to this, and great work, guys. Thank you.
Perfect. Cool, Pankaj. I think that was a great quick run through. One thing that I definitely take away, I need to invite you sooner again to provide an update. So the next time there is some important piece where you update the sites, let me know, or I will reach out again to you so that we can have you back on the show, because I think this is really extremely valuable, and I think it's great to have you talk about this. So I hope that it's not 2 years before we see you again, but much sooner.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the feedback on the article. So you have connected me with a lot of people in Microsoft who are very interested in leveraging these articles, contributing to the development of these articles. As a roadmap, we are looking to see that where we talk to other groups within Microsoft as well and get their feedback. So again, this is a living article. It's constantly evolving, and as we get more feedback, we will keep on updating these articles.
Perfect. Great. Pankaj, thank you so much for joining. And as said, I hope to see you again soon on our podcast.
And thank you so much for inviting us, Holger. It's always a big pleasure to be on your podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.